Okay. Hello, Instagram universe. I appreciate your feedback on my poll. There were only two people who didn't want it. One is sitting behind me. There she is. She didn't want a video of just here's how you buy your first road bike. But you know what? I'm going to make one anyway. Because why not? We're in quarantine and you should know how to buy a road bike. So I'm going to try something new. There's this thing called NBA Desktop where apparently they like talk about the NBA and they also kind of show their desktop as to what's there. So this is going to be part one. And part one, we're going to talk about what frame geometry. So basically how like a road bike kind of looks. You can tell by the way that it's built and what it's for. And there's two examples of a road bike that I'll share. One is a for like racing. And it's going to be like a different road feel, and then the other is kind of more relaxed for like longer rides. So let's jump in. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so this is the first thing that we'll talk about. This is a quick snapshot. I searched road bike geometry, and I think for a lot of people who are getting into cycling, the big question is, well, what do all these things mean? And this image here kind of talks about what these things are, right? So if you ever see a bike and you're wondering, oh, I just need to adjust my seat height, or the handlebars need to be a certain way, like this is kind of what matters. So the first thing to know that's really, really important is you need to get a proper bike fit. Right, and the way that you get a proper bike fit is that you would need to go to a bike store, and bike stores are actually open now, right, during quarantine, so you can actually get a bike there. But the main thing that you want to measure for, and I could follow up with links on this, is basically your leg length, right, and that's going to be able to kind of get your legs over the what's known as the top tube here. So that's going to kind of dictate the size of the bike that you need. And then from there, you can adjust the seat or the saddle. You can go higher, it can go lower, it can go forward, it can go back. And that's also going to dictate the reach, right, in terms of your handlebars. So the biggest thing that I'll say on this is, one, like kind of what's your main motivation for getting a bike, right? If you feel like you want to go out and ride and you want to put a lot of power down, like I was talking about yesterday, for getting a power, for getting a trainer, like a Bluetooth connected trainer for using one of the apps like TrainerRoad or Zwift, you could get a bike that has, the thing that you're looking for is going to be a flat top tube. So it's not going to angle down, it's going to be more flat. And I'm going to talk about why that's important in a second. Or if you want a bike that's kind of longer rides, more relaxed, you're sitting kind of upright, kind of versus hunched over, that you probably see like riders in the Tour de France that has that. In this case, you will find, what's known as a sloping down tube to be more relaxed, right? So you'll actually sit up, you won't sit back, and there's pros and cons to that. So that's the point of this video, that we're going to talk about kind of the notion of the top tube. And the top tube is going to be something that is going to be incredibly important when you're buying your first road bike, because that's going to dictate how you feel more than anything else. So that's how the geometry looks. Let's jump into two examples. So for a lot of folks who are getting their first bike, I always recommend Cannondale is a really big manufacturer. They're based up in Connecticut, and they just produce a ton of bikes. So it's always good to like look at like the big manufacturers like Cannondale. And there's another one that we'll talk about, Giant, in a second. So this is like your typical road bike when you look at it. And the reason it's a typical road bike is, notice the top tube here, it's relatively flat, right? If you were to put a scale on this, it wouldn't have any kind of degrees, right? It would just kind of sit there, kind of like you're putting it right on your kitchen, table, or right on the floor. And the reason this is important to point out is, on my bikes, right, that I use, I have a flat top tube. And the flat top tube, basically is optimized for, literally like you're sitting here tucked in, right? And that's going to be potentially uncomfortable to a lot of people. but you'll build flexibility over time. And the reason that top tube is important and that position is you'll feel kind of more connected to the bike, particularly if you're riding just on road and tarmac. And we live in Manhattan, so if you go around Central Park, right, you kind of feel it more. The other thing is you notice the handlebars, right? They kind of curve down, and these are the shifters, right, that are here. And these shifters, right, you'll end up reaching, and that's how you shift and brake. So this is like a standard road frame, and I think that's the first thing you want to look at, which is if you feel like you have the flexibility and you feel like you want to be kind of more connected and kind of feel the road, this is a bike that will be pretty, and also the other thing is it'll be pretty responsive. So you'll tend to feel more on the bike when you're pedaling, when you're getting out of the seat in terms of actually your handlebars and kind of maneuvering. And this is like an awesome way to kind of get started. And this bike is not that, by the way, we'll talk about kind of cost of bikes, in a second video, but this one actually isn't that bad in terms of price. So like, that's the first thing to look at, which is top tube. This is like the classic road bike. The next bike that we'll talk about is this bike from Giant, which is a Contend. And the biggest thing you'll notice here is literally the top tube slopes down. And the reason this is important is you're literally not going to sit like this. You're going to sit more upright like this, and you'll probably, be outreached. And the part that's kind of important there is it's going to just be it's going to be more comfortable, right? As you're literally riding, and you're not going to kind of be hunched over. And what a lot of people have for this type of bike, people will call this more of an endurance kind of geometry or fit. The endurance feel just allows you to be strolling more comfortable. If you like doing, 15, 20, 30-mile rides, it'll feel like, it feels more like a Cadillac, right? I would say, like in terms of like the feel and kind of the plushness. Whereas like this Cannondale road bike will feel more like a sports car, right? Or like a Corvette, or just kind of more nimble that's there. So a lot of like first time riders will kind of look at this bike and say, oh, this is actually a really good way to get going. And I agree, because the nice part about this is that you can start off kind of sitting up forward, but then over time, you can lower the seat, you can kind of extend the reach, right, a little bit. And then you'll find like, okay, maybe you actually want to get more flexibility. So if you feel like you don't have the flexibility, you want something more comfortable, you're not doing like crazy long rides, this could be pretty good. But if you feel like you have the flexibility, you're ready to kind of jump right into kind of that posture, the top tube, right, in terms of being flat, is a good way to start. So that's the first video we'll do, which is mainly talking about geometry, and that's incredibly important. That's the first thing we have to talk about. The next video we'll talk about is like, what are the costs, right, that kind of go into the bike? Because it gets super confusing with all these different terms, and we'll break that down. And then the third video will basically be some recommendations that I have for like, here's a few bikes that I think would be good. Thanks, dudes. I'm not gonna do the next video.